24 years after the original masterpiece came out, Ridley Scott has given us Gladiator 2, a sequel to one of the greatest films of all time, Gladiator. And obligatory, what every reviewer on YouTube is saying, are we not entertained? Let's go ahead and find out as we jump into this review of Gladiator 2. Yeah! What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Cinema Sermons. My name is Kevin, and today we are reviewing Gladiator 2, which is a sequel to the 2000 film Gladiator, which is one of my all-time favorite films. And in this review, I'm going to do a lot of callbacks and comparisons to Gladiator, because that's what this movie does. And we'll go ahead and get into that. But Gladiator, in my opinion, is one of the perfect films. It's a straight up 10 out of 10. You have movies like Gladiator, Braveheart, Rocky, Die Hard, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Empire Strikes Back. A few of those movies that are just perfect films. And for my rating for this movie, we gotta understand, like a 1 out of 10 is like Hellraiser Bloodlines, or like The Room or something like that. 2 out of 10 is like Exorcist II, The Heretic. So there's some really bad movies out there, right? So understand, when I give this movie this rating, I'm not saying I love it, I think it's anywhere close to the original. It's just not, but we'll go ahead and talk about, is this even worth seeing? Is it worth seeing in the theaters? So let's jump into the review. Before we do, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. It helps out the channel tremendously. Let me know down in the comments below if you've seen Gladiator 2 and what you thought about it. So jumping into the positives, this movie is very epic and large in scale. And I think it was just so cool to go back to ancient Rome. You know, there was that TikTok trend going around recently of like, how often do men think about the Roman Empire a day? It's a lot. And I think a lot of that is due in large part to the movie Gladiator. And it's fun to just get another sword and sandals genre film, right? I think I just enjoy those period pieces. We always wonder, like, would we be a warrior? Would I be a general of Rome? Probably not. You know, would I even be able to be a centurion, or would I be a gladiator and get killed real quick? You know what I mean? It's fun to just talk about these things and think about it and being immersed in that world. There's some really cool fight scenes. There's some that are really not, and we'll get into that as well. But there are some really cool fight scenes and some really good action as well. If you just want to see sword and sandals, gladiator action, this movie does deliver that. Ridley Scott knows how to film a battle scene. There are a lot of cool battles in this film. Denzel Washington is straight up having a blast. He's just such a maniacal, almost like always lurking in the background, looking how he can get his hands and everything and just benefit on top. And to see him in that kind of role was just tons of fun, and he looks like he's having fun on the screen. When this movie veers off and becomes its own thing rather than just doing the retread of the original, I actually really enjoy it a lot more. It does about maybe beginning of the third act go in its own direction, and when it does that, that's when I started to get invested, and I'm like, okay, this is a story that we haven't really seen yet in this genre. We've seen that story, but I'm not going to get into any spoilers. So when it did that, I did enjoy it. And finally, just the costumes and set design. They really put a lot of money into that budget, and it really shows on screen. Everything looks fantastic. Getting into a mix, which I really don't do very often, but I do have a lot of mixed in here. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen any of the trailers, but they give it away in the trailers. So this film's protagonist is Lucius from the first film, and they make him Maximus' son. That really bothered me because in the first movie, Lucilla says her son is nearly 8, and Maximus says my son is also nearly 8. And he's like, I knew your husband, I mourned him. So the way that this portrays is that if Maximus was to have a kid with Lucilla, that he would have cheated on his wife for them to be the same age, which dilutes everything that Maximus went through. He was such a good, honorable family man, and really just one of my favorite characters of all time. I mean, like, even the way that I respond to my Christian faith, it has a large part to do with this movie. And I mean that in the sense, when Maximus describes himself, he says,
loyal servant to the true emperor, Marcus Aurelius.
And I even think of that, like, no matter what my role is, I want to be a loyal servant to Jesus Christ. Not just be forgiven, not just, you know, get my fire insurance and not go to hell. I want to be a loyal servant and serve Christ with honor and dignity like Maximus does in this movie. That's how much of an impact this movie and this character had on me. So to have him cheat on his wife, I didn't like. They skirt by that by saying that Lucius was 12, which means that it was before he got married and had his kid, and Lucilla just never told him that it was his because she didn't want to ruin what he had going on. Okay, I think it's cheap, but it quelled one of my biggest fears with the film. My next mix is our lead, Paul Mescal. I didn't hate him in the lead, but you don't love him. And when you're coming off of the charismatic, enigmatic Russell Crowe, who won Best Actor for the film Gladiator, which won Best Picture, that's an impossible task. That's literally almost impossible shoes to fill. And like I said, I didn't hate him, but I didn't love him, and that's not what you want in a protagonist. Another miss for me is Pedro Pascal's character, General Cassius. I really liked that idea of a general who is torn between duty and morality, where he's doing what he's told to do because he's a loyal servant of Rome, but he hates what Rome has become and he doesn't like it. And there's a scene where he's like, I'm tired of watching mothers and wives mourn their dead. And he does not take pleasure in killing at all. I really wish we could have explored more of him and the dynamic between Cassius and Lucius. That was the most interesting part of the movie, and we didn't spend any time on it. So that's definitely a mixed for me. Getting into my negatives, this movie just didn't need to be made in the first place. We did not need a sequel to Gladiator. It is a standalone story, or was a standalone story. This is just a story that didn't need to be told. And the first 2/3 of the movie tells that same story again. And it reminds you all the time of like, hey, remember this movie that you loved so much? Remember that from the first movie? Here's a callback, here's a reference, here's a flashback scene to that movie that you loved so much. And I'm like, I'm just gonna go watch that movie because you're telling the same story, just doing it worse. Like by the time Maximus is betrayed in the first movie, we're over a half hour into the film. We care about Maximus. When the tragedy happens to Lucius in this film and his wife dies, which that's stupid anyway. You brought your wife to battle, bro. That's what happens. There's a reason they didn't have a bring your wife to work day back in those days, because she would have died most likely. Most men died. You know what I mean? So the revenge angle doesn't work because he wants to kill the general of Rome who didn't even kill his wife, but your wife went into battle with you. You can't really be mad that she died. Like, I mean, it sucks, but it's not like she was brutally murdered like Maximus's wife, you know what I mean? But we don't spend any time with her, and what we do get, she doesn't seem like a very charming or enticing character to be around. So when she dies, you just feel you just don't care. And the revenge arc that Lucius goes on, you just don't care. It seemed like the rage was a little bit forced. And again, we have to compare it to Maximus because this movie compares it all the time. It just doesn't live up. It really just doesn't live up. And it just reminds you that we've seen this story told. We've seen it told a lot better. The CGI in this movie sucks. It's so bad. Whenever you introduce CGI monkeys, it's bad. Unless the movie's called Planet of the Apes, never introduce CGI monkeys. They have like these demon-looking baboon things, and that whole scene was just, I was not interested in that at all. We've seen it in the trailer. Then they have a giant CGI rhino, which I'm like, rhinos don't get that big. They're big and they'll jack you up, but they don't get that big. You know what I mean? So you got the steroid-fueled rhino, and that's all CGI. It looks super stupid. And then even the scene in the trailer when Lucius like jumps out of the way looking like Captain America, I'm like, people don't jump that far. It was stupid. And then they flood the Colosseum, which I'm told actually happened, and they would flood it and recreate naval battles. And I know the Romans really had those aqueducts and things like that. But crystal clear blue water with sharks, great white sharks of all things. I think they were great whites, I might have been mistaken. But when you flood the Colosseum with sharks and the water is crystal clear blue, it's just stupid because one, it's unrealistic, and two, it was just over the top. Bigger does not always mean better, right? I'm someone who loves the 1980s. I love things being over the top. Overkill is underrated. But in a movie like Gladiator, you just don't want that and you don't need that. So the CGI sucked, and a lot of those bigger battles just didn't hold up, you know? I'm like, when it was a little bit of a smaller scale thing, like the fight between him and Cassius, I really enjoyed that more. Or just the Cassius versus a few other people. I like the Cassius more than I like Lucius, probably. But that's probably really all I have for my negatives. So overall, this is a watchable movie. It's enjoyable enough. I want to save the theater industry, so I recommend you go out, you see it in a theater. They got a really cool popcorn bucket with the helmet. I'm gonna go buy that tomorrow, and I will not take that helmet off at all. It's enjoyable enough. And like I said, if you enjoy sword and sandals, kind of genre films, you're gonna get a lot out of it. But don't go into it expecting a worthy follow-up to one of the greatest films of all time. It just falls flat. So, as we stated earlier, Gladiator is a 10 out of 10 movie for me. It is perfect. If you guys would like to see me do a full-on review of Gladiator, or just why I love it and what it means to me, so not necessarily positives and negatives and all that, but just what Gladiator means to me and why it resonates, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that for all of my favorite movies, man. So let me know what you guys think. So Gladiator is a 10 out of 10, and like I said, we got like Exorcist 2, The Heretic at like 2 out of 10, and The Room at like 1 out of 10, and Poltergeist, right? So with that being said, This is a watchable enough movie. It's competent enough, and being generous, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. It's mediocre. It's something that I probably won't revisit. If I want to watch some of the fight scenes, I'll watch some of the fight scenes on YouTube. I just, when I'm in the mood for this, I'm gonna watch the original, but I'm glad I did see it once. So I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10, a B-. Go ahead and go see it. Go see it in the theater. So again, it doesn't even hold a candle to the original, but it is watchable enough. So go watch it. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you enjoy Gladiator 2, rumor has it they want to do a Gladiator 3, and I'm like, please just let it die. So yeah. That's all I got. Hit that like, share, and subscribe button. It helps out the channel tremendously. And remember, I love you. Jesus loves you. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. See you guys.